She unleashed the force of samurai on us all. Should we get? Oh, let's look at this. Oh my gosh, like Peter Jackson photography.
Who's the hobbit? Maybe. There it goes. There we go. Well, we first were introduced to Dave Filoni at Celebration 4 in LA when we got the first glimpse of the Clone Wars. There was just something so magnetic about Dave. Passion for Star Wars, and it's well known what a fan he was before his time as a Lucasfilm employee. So he had that perfect combination of fan and insider. You just couldn't help but root for the guy.
I was shocked. Right away, he told me he listened to the show. And back in those days, there was no coverage anywhere for Star Wars: The Clone Wars. But we were talking about it every week. And this is just prior to the time of the movie release. So it hadn't even really debuted. And he revealed to me he knew all about our podcast. And it just was really wild to me that he was acting very enthusiastic about coming on the show and talking about the Clone Wars. And he wanted to bring the talent that he worked with onto our podcast.
Jason and Jimmy were really the first podcast I was ever really aware of. That wasn't my world. I didn't know anything about podcasting per se, and I would see this thing at that time called the Forcecast, and I thought, well, what is this? And I would listen to it, and especially for me being a newbie to Lucasfilm back in 2005, I was kind of interested to see, wow, am I even going to show up on their radar? And boy, did I show up for years to come. They were really the first people that gave what my team and I at Lucasfilm were doing a chance.
The Clone Wars and our podcast came up at a time when we both kind of needed each other. I think that the Clone Wars had a certain hill to climb with fans, and so did we. Our show wanted to go to the next level to where we were seen as a legitimate news source, you might say, for Star Wars fans. The Clone Wars needed some help in getting the word out of how great this show was. Check 1, 2, bum, bum, bum.
They were reporting on the Clone Wars as if it was as significant as any of the films that were coming out, and I always appreciated that. You know, they deeply analyzed everything we were doing, and I would sit there and you know, while I was at work at Lucasfilm, I would listen to their podcast, and I would go, no, that's wrong. But then they would say other stuff. I'm like, oh, that's right on. Okay, so they got it. They understood what I was trying to say and what we were writing. So it's just, for me as a fan, I don't know, it somehow kept me feeling connected to other fans, even though I was now working for Lucasfilm. You know, sadly, I'll be honest with you, there were some amazing sequences.
I think our show spoke to the fan in him. He often said if he wasn't doing what he was doing with Lucasfilm, that he would be trying to be the third co-host on the podcast. He said that a couple of times. Dave would come on our show. He could geek out as much as anybody. He didn't have to dumb it down. He could assume a certain pre-existing understanding of the universe and the characters and all of that. So he could go a little bit deeper. We offered him an outlet that he couldn't find, say, with Entertainment Weekly or USA Today.
The production value of their show is incredible. They have a great banter between the two of them. I mean, the two of them are nuts. I mean, absolutely. And their personalities are both very varied and different. I mean, they combat with each other. It's, you know, in some ways, like, they would be characters in the Star Wars universe. You know, I mean, it's not that far a throw for me to imagine them as radio hosts somewhere in the galaxy far, far away. I just give you the whole thing here of my download on those two. Here they are at this kind of table like you see set up at, you know, a picnic, folded out legs, and they've got these little mechanisms laid out. I'm like, wow, look at this stuff, and this is how you do it. This is really amazing that this works. And they had a cardboard box that they shipped everything in, and someone had fried the board, like one of the computers had completely fried. They were just, it had all the elegance that the Millennium Falcon does. You know, it's not much to look at, but it's got it where it counts, and that kind of sums up Rebel Force Radio.
You know, in sports talk, they go into the locker rooms. We get to go to Skywalker Ranch.
When we first started talking to Dave Filoni back in 2007, 2008, Dave would always tell us these stories about working on Skywalker Ranch. I think it was because I asked him, what's up with the hat? And he explained to us, well, he would go on these walks to contemplate scripts, and he'd be outside in this beautiful environment. So he needed a hat to cover his neck and everything from getting sunburned. Hearing Filoni talk about it, I had a picture in my head of what it would be like to go there.
Well, first of all, it's a privilege as a fan to go to the ranch. There's so few fans that actually get to go. Jimmy and I, we're not filmmakers. We're not in the business. So I think we're part of a pretty small fraternity of Star Wars fans that get to go to, for us fans, what essentially is Mecca, really.
So you drive this windy road as you approach Skywalker Ranch, and around you, you see hills and ravines and greenery. I knew it was going to be nondescript on the outside. I wasn't expecting a flashing neon light saying Skywalker Ranch, over 60 billion served. But I was really surprised at how downplayed the entrance was, just pulling in. I actually drove by it the first time, not realizing.
The one thought that crossed my mind as we were approaching the gate, and I had known, of course, that Jimmy had been there before, but the thought that crossed my mind was, were we really invited? Did they really know we were coming? Because Jimmy comes from a style of journalism and radio, which is if the door isn't open for you, you kick it down. And so I was just like thinking in the back of my mind, really, do they know we're coming? Is this going to be okay? So the crackly voice comes, out of the intercom. Jimmy Mack for Matt Wood. And I'm expecting him to say, Jimmy what? Jimmy who? But to my surprise, they said, come on through. Gate open. Amazing feeling to go through that gate knowing that I was going to see for the first time the house that Star Wars built.
And when the gates opened up and just driving that winding road toward the tech building and the main house, I think I just took my foot off the accelerator and I said, let me just soak all this in. There's no need to hurry.
I think that the ranch is just as much a part of the mythology of Star Wars as the story in the movies. I mean, if you think about what we grew up as fans hearing about, it wasn't just the stories themselves, it was the creative process and the creative people that helped make the films. And one of the outgrowths of that was this, essentially what is sort of a commune for filmmakers. And so there's a mythical quality to it. Also knowing the care that George put in planning the ranch out so that it really was this incredibly natural, comforting environment for creative people to do their process. It symbolized the incubator almost for Star Wars.
We approached the main house. Plenty of photo ops, and then Matt made the move up the steps onto the porch. My head started to swim, and I said, here we are, we're crossing the threshold.
You know, you kind of look at each other and you go, wow, we made it.
And you walk in there and there's a display cabinet, and there are legitimate props from the Indiana Jones films, the Javitos Idol, the whips, indie whips, maquettes from Star Wars Episode 1, Charlie Chaplin's hat, the actual Imperial Walker that Phil Tippett moved frame by frame. It's stop motion photography. In fact, that walker is there. That is Star Wars history. And of course, in the library, it's beautiful, ornate wood design, spiral staircase. But the first thing that captures your attention, you look up at the stained glass mural that serves as the ceiling and cascades this orangish glow down onto the books and the desks. It's just an incredible room.
Jimmy decided to go off-roading a little bit on our way out of the ranch. We ended up to where we know the archives are. And to be that close, to be a door width away from what we know to be back there, that was incredible. That was incredible. I would love to go through it sometime, but it was not to be then. But it's always good to have goals.